Good morning. This is John Feldt with Blue Water Outlook. This is the morning hydrometeorological briefing. This is the first time for you. What I'm looking at are the inland impacts to water resources and rivers, potential for flooding or else beneficial impacts for drought. Now here's the latest track. There's been some agreement on the track for the first 24 hours. However, once it moves close to the shore, there seems to be a little bit more disagreement or spread in some of the models on what it might do. And that's going to bring an uncertainty in the rainfall forecast as it moves inland. I think this is going to be a very complicated rainfall forecast as it moves inland. Here are the wind speed probabilities, just to give you some idea that there will be quite a bit of wind with this system, not only along the immediate Gulf Coast, but also well inland. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the rainfall potential and the impact on water resources. Well, here are the latest ensembles from one of the models. You can see the drift that we've seen in the last couple days to the west continues, but mainly once it moves inland. I think the track from the current position to where it gets close to New Orleans, you can see all those lines are spaced fairly well together. It's when it moves inland that they they sort of spread apart. And that's going to make it very complicated for the rainfall forecast. I also have concerns that this system has that possibility of slowing down, and that's going to really make a very big difference for rainfall. I've said for a number of days, I think Isaac will go into the history books for a number of impacts. I'm almost positive that heavy rainfall and flooding will be one of the primary ones. Now, over the last couple hours, we've seen some signs of strengthening as it moves across the Gulf. The last radar picture, one of the last ones, we saw some signs of perhaps the convection beginning to move around the circulation. Perhaps even that's forecasting the development of an eye over the next couple hours. Here's the satellite picture, and the bumpiness is the convection or thunderstorms, and those are continuing to build, most likely due to a source of that warmer water that's feeding into it. That trend is expected to continue, and that's going to keep the continuing to organize and intensify over the next 24 hours to 48 hours. For a while, we're not going to have really good radar pictures because it's going to be in the central Gulf. Then as it moves closer to the coast again, New Orleans, for example, will begin to pick up satellite or radar information. Okay, so here's the rainfall forecast from NOAA's Hydrometeorological Prediction Center. I think there's a pretty good agreement that when it pushes in, we're going to have that extreme rainfall over parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, perhaps northwest Florida, anywhere in the yellow, green, or blue. Now remember, the heaviest rainfall is usually along and to the right of the track of the low, or the hurricane or tropical storm. So the axis of this heavy rain, that's not the axis of the track of the tropical storm. That's going to be off to the left. Now there are going to be, there are a lot of exceptions to that, but that's a general rule. Now I think what makes it a little bit complicated here is if the track goes a little bit further to the west, this entire rainfall forecast could be shifted to the west. I think there's a little bit of uncertainty of how much is also going to go into Georgia, that spike off to the east as some moisture is pulled ahead of a front. That might occur, but that's a higher degree of uncertainty than that push of moisture that's going to be associated with the actual tropical storm or hurricane. Okay, so let's look at the past conditions over some of the southern U.S. And it's a mixed bag right now. The blues are above normal rainfall over the last 30 days, which means soil moisture is a little bit wetter, and that you'd see a response either to runoff, inflows into reservoirs, or rivers quicker than areas in yellow or red, which are very dry and will tend to soak up a bit more rain. I think the area, at least from a general standpoint, where there'd be more concern for flooding, in addition to the immediate coastline, would be Mississippi and Alabama. They've persistently have received more rain over the last month or so, actually many months now. I wouldn't call it overly wet, but it's definitely wetter than areas of Arkansas or much of Louisiana. Now, with any type of tropical storm or hurricane, such as Isaac, there's going to be widespread pooling of moisture. There are going to be widespread urban impacts. There will be flash flooding. But I think the more main stem river flooding, you'll see some association with these areas that are a little bit more vulnerable due to recent rainfall. Now, if we look at the USGS stream flow, you can see that as well. We have areas in Alabama and Mississippi in green and blue, and that's generally normal stream flow levels for this time of year. Areas of red are well below normal. So you can see it goes very quickly from Georgia into parts of Alabama and Mississippi, from very low flows on rivers to normal flows. Now, if the river's at normal, it's going to go up quicker into flood stage than below normal. So we see areas of vulnerability. As far as Louisiana and Arkansas, been below normal, especially Arkansas, even though they've received some more recent rain. That's been in a long-term drought, so rivers are still have not responded in that area and are pretty low. So as far as a significant river flood outlook, and keep in mind, significant river flooding means moderate or major, the more substantial type flooding. Here's the outlook, current outlook. Now this is going to be changed a lot. I think over the next couple days, depending on where the actual heavy rain falls. But right now, it's associated with that sort of push of tropical moisture as it pushes onshore. And then as it gets further inland, even though there could be some widespread minor flooding, right now the river forecast centers are not calling for significant flooding. This is early in the game. Keep in mind that flooding will go on for many days after. We will still have flooding next week from Isaac, so this will change, but I wanted to give you just an early heads up. Now, one of the things that I look at is I like to have some rules of thumb on when we might start to get the problems start. And I sometimes look at flash flood guidance. I have other things I look at as well. But this is sort of a trigger of when soils will get to the point that the initiation of more significant runoff will occur. Now, that might mean when is that potential for flash flooding? So this is a 6-hour flash flood guidance. So if there was the blues 3.5 to 4 inches of rain in 6 hours, that's about when you might expect to start getting some flash flood problems. But another way to look at it is I think that can be looked upon as that's when rivers will start to respond with more significant inflows or more significant inflows into reservoirs. So the trigger right now, or the guidance rule of thumb, is about 3 to 4 inches of rain before you really begin to see more significant runoff. Now that's over a 6-hour period. Tropical weather, tropical storms are going to be able to produce much more over shorter periods of time, and that'll cause those localized impacts I mentioned, such as urban, pooling, and flash flooding. Okay, now a tropical system or hurricane is very complex. It can produce flood or welcome rain, and most likely with Isaac, some combination of both. The heavy rain, this is a graphic that I put together that shows the rainfall forecast, and that's sort of the heaviest rain area, overlaid with the drought monitor, and that's where I put dry. And we have 2 areas of extensive drought over the southern U.S., in Georgia and then in Arkansas up into the Midwest. Right now, I sort of put in the blue lines the axis of where the heavy rain might go, and it's possible that it could bring some drought relief to Arkansas, perhaps even into the Midwest, as well as a spike off to the east into Georgia. Now, between that's that area where there could be the greater flood concern: Louisiana, Northwest Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. So this could be, subject to change as we go through the event, Isaac could be where we have welcome rainfall that alleviates drought impacts in some areas, and at the same time, we could have significant flooding in others. That's not all that unusual for a tropical system to have this complexity where we have impacts both on the beneficial side and also on the flood side. Well, that's been the morning briefing. I will be updating this later today. If you find this information useful, please pass it along. You can subscribe to receive notice of updates at bluewateroutlook.com or subscribe to the videos through the YouTube subscription channel. Again, this is John Feldt. Thank you for listening.